We have one brief talk before lunch. I'd like to ask Amy Johnson, the research director at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago, to tell us just a bit about the questions that were raised at last night's community forum.
And I did promise to keep this super brief because I know I'm keeping you from lunch. But I just really wanted to bring the discussion questions that were brought up at the community event last night to the scientific community so you know what's happening in the conversations that are happening out there. I know some of you actually attended the event. But things that really struck me was the overall just disbelief. Is Mr. Brown really cured? Is this possible? Really, are you cured? And he said, they've taken so many vials of my blood. Yes, yes. So that really struck me as something that, we're up against, and we have to work on communicating that. And another thing on the flip side was, what does this do? What are the implications for prevention messaging? If there's this information that, okay, this person was cured, what does that mean for disinhibition of risk behavior, and how do we message that, this isn't going to be widespread. This is a proof of concept we're hearing today, but how do you communicate that to a lay audience and not a scientific audience? And I think that's really important to consider as we move forward in this. So being victims of our own success, I think, was the phrase last night that we talked about. And then also just what came up that struck me was how far are we from a cure was brought up. And I think Rich said 5 to 10 years. So that's the timeline he's giving you guys. So we got to get to work and, right? The quote is good. And then there was a call for funding, a large call for funding and diversifying the funding stream to really fund cure research in the next 5 to 10 years. That was my 2 minutes. All right.
Without further ado, introduce to you Mr. Timothy Brown. And he's the reason why we're all here. He's the reason why there are researchers around the world studying how to cure HIV, because he showed us that it's possible. Timothy, we'd love to hear your comments today. And congratulations on 7 years being free of HIV.
I would first like to say that it's not really me, it's actually Dr. Gerhuter who had the idea, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for him. So, yeah. Anyway, let's see. I need my glasses. I would first like to thank the Northwestern University and the AIDS Foundation of Chicago for organizing this important conference. Special thanks to Rich, John, and David, and the entire team and all of the organizers and agencies that have co-sponsored these events over the past 2 days. They have stepped forward from the front lines to continue to make an impact on helping win the war against this dreadful disease. Thank you. Since almost all of you have heard my story, in fact, I feel like most of you intimately. In fact, I feel like I know many of you intimately, since you probably have samples of my blood or tissues in your laboratory freezer right now. I want to say that everyone here today, even though you don't always receive the accolades that you should, without your decision and dedication and hard work and in the trenches, there would be no hope for an AIDS-free world. So on behalf of the grateful world, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Gerhuter, who could not be with us today. This young and brilliant, formerly long-haired rocker, hematologist from Berlin, that came up with the crazy idea for the first time ever stem cell transplant that led to my cure and ultimately saved my life. Sorry. Late 2012, I met up with Garo at a gene therapy conference in St. Louis at Washington University, and I asked him to be honest with me and tell me what my chances of survival were before my unique stem cell transplant. I started conservatively at 50%, then went down to 25%, and finally arrived at 5%. He looked me in the eyes and said he and his medical team felt that I only had a 5% chance of survival. Now that I live part-time in Las Vegas, I know you can beat the odds. In fact, I won $45 on my first try at a slot machine when I moved there. I got the dollar from from Dave Purdy. I quickly cashed out. I didn't want to take any chances and instead took the $45 and bought a really nice cigar. It was berry flavored, and it was really, really yummy. I would like to thank Dr. Stephen Deeks and Dr. Jay Levy, who took care of me while I was in San Francisco. Like I mentioned, I now live part-time in Las Vegas. I live there with my partner, Tim. Yes, we are now referred to as Tim 1 and Tim 2. I think I am Tim 1, although Tim might not agree. His family calls him Tim 1 and me Tim 2. Since I came out as the Berlin patient a few years ago, I used to feel like I had to read my speech because I was petrified that I would screw up and forget something important as it relates to my story. Last year, I decided to memorize my speech about my story. I figured no one knew my story like I did. But today is not one of those days. I apologize, but I'm having some challenges, but please know that my words are from the heart. My story is really a tribute to the hundreds of people that have been in my life and have come into my life since I've become the first person in the world cured of HIV. Please bear with me as I go back to reading my speech and share with you my idea of an AIDS-free world. But first, just in case you have not heard my story, here is my story in 5 minutes or less, which will be kind of hard since it spans almost 17 years since I was diagnosed with HIV in 1995. So here we go. Here's my story in 5 minutes or less. I was born in Seattle, Washington. I'm an only child. My father left us when I was an infant. I never met him. Sorry. I was attending school in Berlin in 1995 when I tested positive for HIV. I was terrified and thought for sure I was going to die. Some of my friends had already died from AIDS. A cure was never discussed back then. I was prescribed only AZT. Then the protease-enriched drug cocktail was realized. The next 7 years were pretty uneventful. It wasn't until 2006, while living in Berlin, that I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. This was bad news. A young hematologist, Dr. Gerhuter, started me on chemotherapy the very next day. I developed pneumonia early on. I had to stop my third round of chemo halfway through when I developed sepsis. Tubes were placed in my heart. I should have died. I was released from the hospital and my leukemia appeared to be in remission. Yeehaw! I took a vacation to Italy. Unknown to me, Dr. Huter was reading about something called a rare CCR5 receptor genetic mutation. In 2007, while I was on a trip to the US, I soon found out the leukemia had returned. Shit, not again. Initial attempts at a different chemotherapy were not successful. I was going to die. However, stem cell transplant became a viable option. Then, eureka! Dr. Huda had a revolutionary stem cell treatment idea. Why not use a compatible donor who had the CCR5 mutation, someone who is naturally immune to HIV? He said, maybe it would not only cure my cancer, but also my HIV. Really? I said no to the groundbreaking treatment idea. I never liked guinea pigs, especially me. Shit, the chemotherapy didn't work. I'm going to die. Again, Dr. Hooter discusses with me the revolutionary CCR5 stem cell transplant idea. I finally agree. Holy cow, Dr. Hooter finds a compatible CCR5 delta 32 negative donor. I undergo total body irradiation to wipe out my body's entire immune system. I tell Dr. Hooter that my boyfriend wants me to stop taking HIV meds before the stem cell transplant. Dr. Hooter says no, it's not part of the protocol. I put my foot down. I refuse to participate in the groundbreaking CCR5 stem cell transplant. Dr. Hooter has an emergency meeting with his colleagues who come back and say he says he changed the protocol. I can now stop taking my HIV meds. I received the CCR5 stem cell transplant. 3 months later, there is no sign of HIV in my body. Really? They do more tests, lots and lots of tests throughout my entire body. I'm cured. No one in the scientific community believes it, including the New England Journal of Medicine. The Wall Street Journal writes an article about a strange Berlin patient that has been cured of HIV. Then the New York Times writes an article. Then the New England Journal of Medicine finally agrees to publish Dr. Hooter's report on the mysterious Berlin patient. They announce to the world that, in fact, the Berlin patient is cured of HIV. But wait, no one knows that I am the Berlin patient. My T cell counts increase. I thrive. I go to the gym. I used to have the wasting syndrome, but without HIV in my body, I developed muscles. I was looking good. I was feeling good. Until 2008, when my leukemia returned. Give me a friggin' break. But hey, my HIV did not return. I undergo a second stem cell transplant from the same CCR5 donor. Thank God I have a really nice donor. And doctor, of course. They do more tests and accidentally leave an air bubble in my brain. I go completely paralyzed. I'm delirious. I'm scared. I am in and out of the hospital for more than a year. My mother has come to visit me 8 times in the Berlin hospital. She works in the sheriff's office. She worked in the sheriff's office in Seattle. Her colleagues donate their vacation time so she can be by my side. More tests. There is still no HIV in my system. I am still cured. I realize that I still have many challenges. My body and mind have been through a lot, but I am alive. I am the first person in the world cured of HIV. I know in my heart I will not be the last. It has been just over 7 years since my first stem cell transplant. I am cured of leukemia and I'm cured of HIV. I have had samples taken of my spinal fluid. Ouch, that really hurts. Anal mucosa, yucky. And any other place you doctors can think of to stick needles. But no live HIV anywhere. To be honest, I don't think I really believed I was the first person in the world cured of HIV until the New England Journal of Medicine published my case report in February 2009, almost 2 years after I was cured. Since being cured, I thought I could go on quietly with my life, and some of you might think I would have shouted it from the rooftops. I've always been a pretty private person, so I was initially satisfied with just being cured. But then I decided to come out as the Berlin patient in a German magazine called Stern. It means star in German. It's kind of like the Newsweek in German. Okay. It wasn't until I looked at the bigger picture that I realized that I needed to do more than just tell my story. And that's why on July 24th, 2012, at the 19th International Conference in Washington, D.C., I launched the Timothy Ray Brown Foundation of the World AIDS Institute. Ours is the first organization in the 33 years of this disease whose sole mission is to find a cure for HIV. I am also happy to report that we have launched the Cure for AIDS Coalition, the first public benefits corporation focusing on AIDS. It's basically a corporation that acts like a nonprofit, but we can lobby aggressively in Washington, D.C. and around the world about a cure for HIV without getting into trouble. Also, it means that we will find creative ways to fund our efforts in support of a cure for HIV without tapping into the dwindling resources and grants available to nonprofits that are really struggling to keep their doors open. We know we just have to be really creative. We will be looking at things like crowdfunding. There have been a number of reports of other people that have been cured. I had a lovely and emotional conversation with Dr. Gay regarding her patient, the little girl who lives in Mississippi. I hope to someday still meet the 2 patients from Boston and New York who have unfortunately had their HIV returned. But they are still my heroes, regardless of the outcome. They tried. And science moved forward because of their courage. But there are those that will and who are committed to helping find a cure for HIV and literally turn over their life in the pursuit of science. I had the pleasure of speaking with Eric Blue, a very young man from Louisiana who was diagnosed with leukemia and was living with HIV, who earlier last year bravely agreed to undergo a similar stem cell transplant like I did, except with cord blood. Eric could have said no to the procedure like I first did. I spoke with him by phone and with the entire medical team in Minnesota where the procedure was taking place. Immediately before the procedure and immediately after, I got to speak with Eric and his mother an hour after the procedure. He told me that he was excited to perhaps be cured of HIV like me. 3 months after the procedure, Eric Blue, 12 years old, passed away. I always get very emotional. Passed away. His body fought so hard, but it appears that his immune system eventually rejected the stem cells. It is my understanding that a report will be coming out discussing the findings of the procedure. Eric Blue is my hero. And there will be others too as we come together in search for the arguably the holiest of grails, a cure for HIV, a cure for the millions worldwide living with this dreadful disease, as well as the million that are currently undiagnosed, I believe when you look at my cure, you're really taking a glimpse into the 33-year-old your history of this pandemic, the hope, the dreams, the defeats and the victories, the tears, and in some cases, the times when all you could do was laugh uncomfortably because there were no more tears. For a while there, I thought people were interested in my story because I am a freakish scientific experiment that worked. But people around the world tell me that my story is a story about hope. I strongly believe that together we can turn hope into action, which will then lead to a cure. But we have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. And it's a little tough to follow someone who's so passionate and generous we really all salute you for what you've done and for continuing to try to push for the cure agenda.